It's 12:12. That's an auspicious number.
Mm.
We are late to the party because we were having some restream issues. So Kevin has a ability to do some clearing. So we cleared ourselves and cleared what needed to be cleared actually was restream. So yeah,
made
we've
it.
worked it out and we're here and we hope we didn't lose you. But if we did lose you, then you can watch this on the replay. So, as you know, Kevin and I have been doing a chakra series, and the first Sunday of every month, we discuss a chakra. So, this is the fourth time we're doing it, and hence the fourth chakra. And so, that will be today's topic. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat or something. But Kevin, I have a few questions for you. I do, of course, want to delve into this, but
Yeah.
for those who haven't watched before and aren't familiar with you, I have two questions, and my first one is, so I know that you work with Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, and well, you have lots of beings on your team.
True.
But how did Yeshua and Mary Magdalene announced themselves to you and let you know that they wanted to start working with you in your life and in the work that you do?
Excellent question. Yeah, I think that this was a moment of despair, and I think that I've heard this from a lot of people I know and clients, and where when we reach out in this really kind of desperate place and say, what I said was, I was getting overwhelmed. I was feeling what a lot of healers feel, like just overwhelmed with the work, taking on people's energy. I was working in a healing arts store environment, and so lots of energy in and out of there, and direct contact. I was doing a primarily a modality called toe reading, and so which is kind of how one of the entry points of into this work. And I was in this place where that felt like it was getting interfered with and kind of crumbling, and this move that I made. And so many things in my life were falling apart. And so I reached out to this picture that I have of Yeshua sitting on a rock, and it looks like he's in front of the Flatirons in Boulder, Colorado. And so it just really was meaningful to me, this painting that I purchased. And so I just looked at the painting and I said, if you want me to keep doing this work and progressing in this way, you have to teach me how to heal. So how to heal myself, how to heal others. And I had learned lots of modalities, and I was kind of finding myself in this place, and a very clear voice. And this is unusual for me as far as how I interact. So I'm very kinesthetic, and so I usually get a feeling or a goosebump or something like that. But this was a voice, and it was different. I had not heard this voice before. And it was very simple. There is no healing, only love. That's the lesson. So it was profound for me, just because just even in that moment I felt this sense of relief, and this thing that was heavy upon me began to let go, and all of the learning that I've done since then is in alignment with that teaching, that there is no healing, only love. And as I learned since then ways to understand that, that's going to work into what we're talking about today, as far as there's this universal life force energy, and when you have enough of that, you don't have illness in the physical body, you don't have illness in the mental emotional bodies, you have enough. And so it's a very profound statement, and it does kind of go into what we're going to talk about that word love. So a lot of times we have different definitions of that, but in this case, it is chi, prana, universal life force energy. And if I'm able to be in a space where I can create that within myself and then create a field of that, then there will be healing. And so that's the definition of healing, is that it will occur naturally in a field of love.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
And what about, so you heard the voice and that was
Mhm.
Yeshua's voice. Have you ever heard Mary's voice? Well, I know you communicate with both of them all
Yeah,
the time, but when did Mary sort of make her first appearance?
it was earlier than that, and it was in there were several different ways that this energy comes to me through teachings, different teachers that I had, and different ways of understanding ascended masterhood. And so this is definitely part of that, where the Christ, Magdalene, Jesus are a couple. And so it came through that teaching where lots of teachers speak to this Jewish man going through the process would be married. And so that is an understanding that in the tradition that he would have achieved going through the steps, right? So every religion has steps, and he would have come to this place of being married. And so that there was not a marriage that's confusing. And of course, there's entire religions based on the fact that he was not.
Mm.
And so I acknowledge that. And I also acknowledge that in this guidance that I get, the Christ or the light is that connection of the two of them in physical. So physical humans that are metaphysical and spiritual. And so this is where that understanding came through, and then different teachings come through of where she is as a disciple, as a partner, as a teacher, as a fellow teacher. And as that begins to occur, I begin to meet women who are definitely in alignment with this Magdalene energy. In the Lakota tradition, Magdalene is white buffalo calf woman. And they have this really clear definition of that she shows up and she says, I'm here to teach you this very specific thing about the pipe and about how it works and about how prayer can deliver these messages. And so I come through it from that tradition as well. That here, and then when I asked about Yeshua or Jesus, this question was answered pretty simply. Oh, that's Big Brother. So there was a real clear assessment of who that was, that there's a human, and they knew who it was based on how I was talking about him and them and how he traveled through the Americas. This when it was predominantly Native American. And so many of these tribes in Native American tradition have this understanding as well. And that's how it was presented to me. Like, this is Big Brother. This is a teacher. This is somebody who, has gifts to offer us and is another one of these, in my world called spirit guides. But in the assessment of ascended master, that just means higher, more teaching, more ability. And I do believe that there's a polarity to each one of these entities. And so I think the polarity basically is the masculine and feminine at that point as well. So the Christ becomes that. And so, yeah, so she has shown up in many different teachings in my life, but just relationally, as far as the feminine attribute of the ascended master Christ.
Mhm. Hmm. I still haven't gotten to the chakra yet, but it's all tied in.
It is.
What do you think about this business of you know, people who say, "Oh, Christ will return or is going
Hmm.
to return in our time." I get the sense that some people who are saying that expect to see somebody that looks like Jesus walking
Hmm.
around on planet Earth. So,
Yeah.
um, I get the sense that those two entities have already returned, but they're
Mhm.
not in physical form. They're returning through our hearts. How do you see it?
Yeah, that's just reiterating what you just said. This heart chakra, which is the connection to these ascended, all of the ascended masters, and using master that has a masculine connotation, but in this way, it is mastership, or the achievement of lessons and learnings and wisdom that come from effort. And so that would be the return, would be the connection within us of our masculine and feminine natures. And so, as a shaman, basically, that's how I was identified, as a two spirit, as someone who actually has, and that word spirit to me would identify soul. So, two souls, or a masculine and feminine soul that essentially occupy this physical body and connect in the heart, and it is the Christ. So this would be the light that is achieved through bringing these aspects of polarity together in my heart. And so when more people do that, then there's a tipping point, there's a percentage that we hit where it becomes into consciousness. And so that's what I believe the teaching is that we're getting towards the tipping point where more people are connecting this masculine and feminine self, and that is creating a return of the Christ, or the light.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So many. I mean, it's like the buzzword everywhere. People are,
Yeah.
you hear these words, divine masculine, divine feminine, and
Hmm.
I'm merging my divine masculine feminine, or I'm healing my
Hmm.
divine masculine, or I'm healing my divine feminine within the self, whether you're a man or a woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so this is where we're feeling that, even though we're feeling very polarized in our world that we live in, we are also hearing and feeling this exact thing that you just mentioned. There is more understanding that developmentally humans are developing. And so this is part of our development. That's why we see chakras as developmental energies. And so coming to this place of the heart and the bringing together, as I work on these aspects of myself, as I work on my receptivity in my feminine, as my directed masculine energy, when I balance those two things. And again, are we ever in balance? Maybe not, but we're always achieving it. We're always on the tightrope of, oh, little, little too receptive. I feel overwhelmed and tired. A little too directed. I feel overwhelmed and tired. And so, right. So I think the symptoms of those are the same, where I'm directing myself too much into the world and I need to pull back into a receptive state. And so that's definitely what we're doing here. That's the tightrope. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, so you mentioned the word soul. That was my next question I want to ask you before we go
Mhm,
into the heart
mhm.
chakra. So, you send for people who, oh, I'll put the ticker tape up. It was up earlier.
Oh,
For
okay.
people who sign up for your newsletter,
Mhm,
we get newsletters frequently from you. And I'm taking a course with you right now called Transforming, Transcending, and Transmuting Trauma.
mhm,
And you sent an email. I don't remember the exact gist, but you were saying, hey, we
mhm,
are body, we are spirit, we are soul.
mhm,
And I realized that I've made it to the place I am in my life, been on the planet for 55 years, and I'm still not clear. I'm always asking myself, and
mhm,
many people have many different interpretations.
mhm. Yeah.
But in through your perception, or through the perception of Christed light,
Mhm,
what is the difference between what is soul and what is spirit? Now, I
yeah.
know spirit animates the body.
Mhm.
I still don't understand the difference between spirit and soul.
Yeah, the simple way that I came to this is that, again, with this idea of the three. So when we look at the Trinity, when we look at the three, when we look at the balance of, now we're saying masculine and feminine and heart. So masculine upper three chakras, feminine lower three chakras, and heart in the middle of that. And so what we're doing is we're essentially saying there is a center that isn't in duality. And that's kind of tricky when we think about time and linear time. We're always thinking it's the now and the now and the now. When we meditate and we really access that place that is source, that is this place that I call spirit. So, this is where spirit is the non dual. It's the non dual attribute of this thing, me, Kevin, and my soul that is completely and always reincarnating. And so this is where the soul is a metaphysical aspect of us. And so these are the three: physical me, the chemical suit that I live in, the tissue and the organs and the microbiome, all these things that are physically me. And then the metaphysical me would be soul. And actually, emotional content and mental content, beliefs are in that soul attribute. So we can't just pull out anger and show it to you, but you could definitely know if I am. Right? So there's an awareness of what anger looks like when I am expressing it, but I can't take it out somewhere and show it to you like my liver. And so, right, from that standpoint, it has a non-physical attribute. And so that is part of this soul that reincarnates. And that's why the soul gets wounded. So its soul is living, and we've talked about these dimensional bubbles in this forum here. And so it's like the brain starts to just start melt when you start talking about that. It doesn't like that because the brain is a duality machine that wants things to be me sitting in a chair having this conversation with you. So when we start saying that lifetimes are actually bubbles of dimensionality, and these lifetimes are also my soul. So I have a soul that is incarnated in a lifetime dimensional bubble. And that seems efficient to me. It's like, well, we got a lot to learn. So let's put it in. I don't know how many there are, right? Thousands, hundreds of thousands. I don't know. Millions, maybe. I don't know. But that's the brain exploding stuff. So it is, soul is reincarnating or incarnating, really, in all these different areas and learning different lessons, and they're all integrated back into that soul. And then spirit is the non-dual. So this would be, and I put it in the context of 80% spirit, 10% soul, 10% physical body. So most of who I am is still that non-dual or heart chakra, or not expressed in our duality experience. And that's what makes it hard to hold on to. So that's what I use. I use that word spirit, and that's, again, across the board, many people using different words. So we come through religious traditions, the shamanic traditions. Everybody has a different way of understanding what that non-dual is. So that's what I'm giving the word to, is spirit is that. And spirit then infuses into the soul, and the soul infuses into the physical body. And so those are the three attributes of the self.
So spirit, you're saying, is source energy.
Absolutely.
Is source energy what animates us, or is our soul what animates us?
Yeah, so I would say just like that, like the source energy animates this, that is the soul. And then the soul animates us as physical beings. And that animates it through emotion and belief, and right, so all of these different metaphysical components of the self, the things we can't see: thought, belief, emotion. Those are the primary ones.
If a being reaches enlightenment, do they lose their soul because they're not identified anymore?
Well, I think the enlightenment would be, as I understand it, is I become enlightened, or the light, or the Christ, right? I come into a balance. So these upper and lower chakras, and again, we have chakras on side to side as well, right? So, all the other chakras that we're talking about. But the enlightenment would be that I hold enough of the wisdom of my experience that I know who I am. that I know that I'm a physical body that exists in an illusion. So level 1 illusion. I'm a soul that exists in level 2 illusion. And I am a unified energy that does not have duality. That is the only thing that really exists. And so we're just expressions, soul and physical body, of the real. And so we are, some traditions say mirrors, some traditions say reflection, some traditions, right? So there's lots of different ways to speak about that, but that's essentially what we are: the two illusions, soul and physicality, that feed back into non-dual. And this is the tricky part of non-dual. Is it nothing or is it everything? So is it
It's
everything?
nothing, it's everything, and it's neither.
Absolutely, right? So this is where this brain basically can say, we start with nothing, and then we say, well, if it's nothing, how does it express itself out into duality? So then we put it back into, is it everything in balance? And so that would be enlightenment, is that I come back to the truth of who I am, the only thing that's true. And I'm more in alignment with that than I am a soul and a physical body. So I'm putting them in the context of what they deserve, essentially. And that would be that I live a physical life and I live all of these dimensional bubble lives in order to learn and feed back into source. So I give it back as an offering into source. And so does that then grow? Maybe, right? So that's another possibility, that the expansion of a universe that we live in, or the galaxies, that, right, all the things we understand is bigger than us, expanding. So that could be contributing to the expansion, is every individual living a human life and learning lessons and feeding that back as an offering into source.
When you were explaining spirit, it made me think of neutrinos.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the great part of, right?
They're there, but they're not there, but they're
Mhm.
snooping around all the time. They're going straight through matter. They can go
Right?
anywhere, but they're there, but they're not there.
I love that. Yeah, this is definitely, as science begins to meet these concepts, we get really physical evidence. I mean, that now is physical evidence. What's a wave? What's a particle? Why do they shift and change? Why is it change from a wave to a particle? Why is it, or why does it go through that little slit experiment, right? And so when we get into the quantum, which is the small, does it then replicate the big? I think it does, because in all of these traditions that I am a part of, cycles. So we go all the way into the smallest thing that we can recognize, and then we apply that to, this is the world we live in. This is the big, that's that flower of life behind you, right? So yeah, so it's profound. It gets really big for the brain. That's why I try and do in my work, I try and simplify it to, you're three things: you're a soul, you're a body, you're a spirit.
Gosh, so much we've talked about, and we haven't even gotten to the
Yeah.
chakra. Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm gonna ask one more question, but if spirit feels it's not appropriate right now because we're trying to get to the heart chakra, then we can save it for another time. But the other day, I mean, I think part of what's falling away right now is leaning so heavy towards the patriarchy and trying to come back into some state of balance, and it's literally upending the world, and
Indeed,
in the best way possible, even though it may look really weird and strange and yucky. But
yeah.
I think one thing that really is like, it makes me go, huh, about, like patriarchal Christianity is, you always hear the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. No mother mentioned.
Indeed.
Well, if we were going to bring it into balance, not as somebody trying to rewrite the teachings or say Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but what are Mary and Yeshua's words instead of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, this is definitely where I think we can still take this tradition and we can say this is the essence, that it's a trinity. And then when we put it into the construct of what we experience in our physical lives, there is a mother and a father. When we take our humanness back into different cultures, always a mother and a father. And so that is essentially what I'm doing, is I'm saying when we needed it to be, when we came as a human race to the point where we needed to simplify this into one God. And then what happened was we simplified that into a God. And then primarily what I have been exposed to is that that God has a gender, and that gender is male. And so that's basically how I believe we lost our touch with our
You're not saying
masculinity.
you agree with that. You're just saying that's what the world gets exposed to, right?
Absolutely.
Male, male,
Yeah.
male, male, male.
Absolutely. And so we take it back into the Buddhist tradition, where that place of oneness, that place of spirit, isn't identified as a god, because it's identified as a field, an understanding, a a vast field of understanding that basically we can be involved in and maybe are. So this place of nirvana, or I release the soul and the body into this place. And so this is where I see the shift occurred. And I believe we lost the masculine entity in that transition into one God, because we're still giving it duality. And that's again a huge confusion. So when we speak it as a masculine he God, we're not acknowledging that there is a non-dual within that, because we're speaking of duality. And again, we as humans anthropomorphize or make things human in order to understand them. So that is the compassionate part of this, is we're making it into something in order to understand it. And so this is where I believe that cultures before us have made it into something, but into a father figure. And many of these traditions have that father figure. And so then where's the mother? Of course, there is one. And then we look at, okay, we've had this conversation since probably the 60s or 70s, right? Oh, it's a female god. And so, now we're saying, what is it? What is spirit? What is source? It is both of those things together in a complete balance, where it doesn't hold duality or a gender.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that, when we are believing that there isn't a non-dual space, that is confusing to the brain, because everything we experience in this physical reality is duality.
Yeah.
And so that's the way out.
So do you think they were likening the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost to the body, the soul, and the spirit?
I do, actually. I think that was an attempt to do that, because I really think that they know that that's a foundation of humanness, is a trinity. There's an above and a below, and there's something between the above and below that isn't either one of those.
Yeah.
And
so now, one person was watching and they left. I guess they didn't like the religion thing or whatever. But we weren't really talking about religion. But whatever. Okay, so now, so lots of people there's a term going around. People say golden child.
Yeah.
What they're saying is that as we heal our divine masculine and heal our divine feminine and merge those two, something is born, and that's the golden child.
Yeah.
And that's really Christ's light, isn't it?
It absolutely is. This is where when there are people that can see the aura, and when the aura is balanced, when it reaches that level of above and below and side to side, it turns gold. It has a shimmery gold appearance to it. So, and it's like an egg shape. And so that's all of your chakras basically within that egg. And so when there is balance, it goes to this shimmery gold color. I think that's actually where the concept of alchemy came from as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's all.
Yeah, Dan Winter talks about that. Do you know about Dan Winter? He's a quantum physicist.
Yeah.
he's also been practicing, working with his
Yeah,
kundalini for 30 years. So he's great. He's like spiritual science with
beautiful.
arms and legs,
Yeah.
because he can explain the mechanics of
Mhm.
rainbow body, of,
Nice.
of death, of enlightenment, of like all that. He can. So he had, he's not. Yeah, he's just a beautiful blend because he's got that, he's a quantum physicist, but
Yeah.
he's highly spiritual. So
Mhm.
it's great to hear him break the mechanics down because even if I can't reiterate it, it fires something in
Mhm.
my mind when I hear him talk about it, and it
Absolutely.
resonance, and I'm like, oh, and I like to know about the mechanics.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to teach it to anybody else. I just want to understand it for myself. So I've been listening to him a lot lately.
Excellent. Great. No, it's so important to listen to these teachers, and especially bringing together, because that's essentially bringing this thing that we're calling science, right? When we get into the smaller particles, it gets very spiritual. It loses that definition of science
Mhm.
because we're defining science in a Newtonian way, right? So it's separate. So this is where we are coming together, and we are, as human race, I believe, doing this development of it's not separate. Nothing is separate. As science is looking into the separateness, it's finding connection. And so every time it does that, it finds a deeper and more profound connection.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we're doing here. We're saying that as individuals, when we think things are separate, we then have to come to a place through practice, through learning, through all these things, and find out that it isn't.
Mhm.
That there isn't a separateness, that all three of those identities that we talked about are all interconnected or interdependent.
Mhm.
And so that's where separateness goes away. And that's what we're talking about with this heart chakra, too, right? That
Mhm.
when we come back into that connection, we come back into compassion. So that's essentially what we're about here. so, so all of these conversations have been about the heart chakra, no question about it.
Mm,
yeah.
mm. So the interesting thing about the heart chakra is when you've talked about it before, you've said that in actuality, the heart chakra isn't a chakra, not
Mhm.
as we think of the other chakras. It is
Exactly.
an energy center that connects
hmm
the other chakras. And I, I have this idea. I don't think it's original. Maybe it's from listening to you. Maybe it's
hmm
from a mix of things, but it
Sure.
seems like the 0 point within the toroidal field. Like we have a toroidal
hmm
field, right? And
Yes.
in the center is that heart that's moving everything, everything
hmm
comes from below up into the heart and out. I mean, it's hard to describe, but I
It
think of
totally
the
is.
toroidal field and I think of the heart as the 0 point. But how do you describe it? If it's not a chakra, what and the mind
hmm
likes to say, okay, it's not a chakra, then I need another label because what is it then?
Totally. Yeah. No, it's perfect. I mean, this is definitely the way that you're describing it, and it is important that we're saying that toroidal field is an important thing to understand if you want to understand energy. And so, and there's a lot of theories that this planet is actually that, and it definitely looks that way when you look at the electromagnetic field for sure. And so here is this electromagneticness, which is physical, and we can see it. Put a magnet down, put some metal shavings down, there it is. And so we can see this as this is energy that comes from both directions. Like you said, it comes from below and above. In my yoga training, that is not what I gained. I do believe that in yoga training, that is actually taught. And so we're talking a lot about lower chakras, upper chakras. The chakra itself that is identified as heart is also that field. So if we think of toroidal fields existing as this, right? So it's coming in and coming in and going out. and so that would be the heart. And so this 0 point that you're mentioning is that spark plug gap. So these two things are connected, but how are they connected? In a universal field of energy that does not have duality. So are they really connected?
Mhm.
So I think of it like a spark plug: connect, disconnect, connect, disconnect. We're doing that pretty much all the time as humans: connect, disconnect, connect, disconnect. And we're doing that because our brain would like things to be disconnected enough to where I'm separate from the chair. And but then we have experiences like this where we are not in the same city, we are not in the same room, yet we are connected. And we are connected to people listening that are in different places in this on this globe that we live in. So we're replicating this in all of our science and all of our computers, and everything we do. We're replicating this truth: above and below, as above, so below. And so this is what that heart does: is it creates this neutrality in between the above and below to allow those two to exist.
Mhm.
And then that creates the connection. And that's why through meditation we travel from the physical body into the emotional body, into the mental body, into a more subtle body, into an astral body, into source. And so that's what meditation is traveling through those levels to get to source, and then bringing all of that back. And so that's, we love things that are linear. Toroidal field is definitely not linear, but it is understandable. And so this is where our lower chakras are fed from the earth that we live on. And is that entirely true? No, because it's also fed from a feminine energy that is also part of the wholeness of this universe and everything that we live in. So it's easier to understand earth first as mother, and sky second as father. Then when we get into it a little more, we've got to start really using this brain, this ability to imagine, because that blue sky that I'm looking at with the clouds in it has a black sky behind it with stars in it. And so that's another way of understanding these levels of things that we understand. So the heart is the junction box. It's the connector where all of these chakras connect, and they're all doing this figure eight thing. And that figure eight, does this thing that becomes dimensional. So it becomes this toroidal field at a certain point where I see just a flat two-dimensional. I connect my root to my crown through my heart. And so that's where we start. And is that happening? On some level, it is. And so it's helpful to get to that place. And then what is occurring? All of the other chakras are going, right? They're all doing that. But this is where I started this thinking in this way: 1 and 7, 8. That's what it equals. That's the 8th chakra. That's the golden egg that you're talking about.
Mm.
So when 1 and 7 equals 8, then that is true. When 2 and 6 equal 8, when 3 and 5 equal 8,
Wow.
that's
The
our 8th
infinity
chakra.
symbol. Wow, I never. Wow. Yeah. So we can get to like the oils and how to work with the heart chakra and all that, but
Yeah.
what happens when a person's like heart closes, like they have
Mm.
a traumatic experience or something
Yeah.
that makes them really sad or mad or fearful or angry or whatever, and their heart shuts down, and literally people die of broken hearts, right?
Oh
They die
yeah.
of heart
Absolutely.
attacks. That is really
Yes.
physical manifestation of a broken heart, or too much anger bursting the heart, or however
Mhm.
you want to talk about that.
Absolutely.
So I guess we're talking about the connection between
Hmm.
emotions and the physical organ and the chakra,
Hmm.
and and how that chakra and your physical heart can get shut down. And if it's shut down,
Hmm.
what happens to the other chakras, and how do you open it back up again?
Hmm. Yeah, I think taking what the chakra is. So when it's a toroidal field, it has a duality. And so what I do is with these chakras, like we've mentioned in the past, like with the heart chakra, this is where we're talking about what is the what are the two polarities that exist within this chakra? So it's a good way to understand how a broken heart can be a wrathful heart. And so wrath is the negative or the attached area of our heart chakra. And compassion is the grace or the non attached. And so this is where, when we are attached, which trauma does, it creates an attachment. And like you said, in all the other chakras. And so when it is happening in the heart, and that's why broken heart is usually related to relationship and often related to abandonment, and usually in anger, sadness, or fear, or all of the above that's associated with that abandonment. And so that's where the broken heart basically now starts to affect the physical body and create chemistry, very real stress related chemistry from the attachment. So the attachment, being wrath, is, can I be wrathful enough? Am I allowed to do that in this, society? We're not really allowed to have that level of anger that shows up as wrath, where this thing that happened to me, this traumatic experience, makes me want to burn this world to the ground. And that's wrath. And that's a level of attachment that is, it's the world. And when we start putting it back into the self and developing the self, it becomes compassion. So that's how we transition out of the attachment, which would be the broken heart of the wrathful self, and into the compassionate self. That I change. And with me changing, the world changes, because I can be in this loving kindness position. But there's a ton of work that goes into that. It doesn't start there. It starts with these other chakras, and basically how these other chakras relate to each other. And we will often find that this second chakra is really where the relationship needs to be repaired. And that's really where surrender is occurring. So we surrender to source. That's what we're learning in the class. That's basically why surrender comes before acceptance. That's why acceptance comes before forgiveness. And so we get to this place of gratitude that is the next step into compassion. And so we're seeing this is a chakra development issue. So we start emotional third, mental throat, and then we go to the physical body second, and the subtle body sixth. And then we go out to the edges of who we are.
Wait, what did you say about the second?
Physical body.
Physical body.
Representative physical body.
Okay, and then we go.
Yeah, and then we're out into the root and the crown. And so start at heart, go to third and fifth, go to second and sixth, go to first and seventh.
Physical first and non-physical.
Yeah, so we're doing this stages from the heart. So when we need to forgive, it's just basically what we're talking about here, coming into a place of compassion for self and others. When we do that, we have to do that other work. We have to step through those other chakras, understand what's there, and know what the job is of that particular chakra. And so that's where this one is last in that process. So that's also important.
So if you have a second chakra issue, does that mean that you're having a hard time being in a physical body or being in the physical world, or both?
Well, I think it's both. Absolutely. Yeah. Being in a relationship, right? So you have to be in a soul and a body, and know that you have a spirit to be in an effective, balanced relationship. And so many people are not, right? Many people are just stuck in this physical body, and with their experiences, they don't have a place to go. And so if you don't have a place to go, you're just relying on maybe those old people that were your parents. And so, right, you're looking at that and saying, that's where I'm learning. Where am I learning this from? Sitcoms on television, movies, right? All of these things play out these dramas that are mostly codependent. When we listen to love songs, what are we typically listening to? Some level of codependence. So most of them represent that. And so, this thing where if you leave, everything ends. And when we get to this level of development where we're truly in the heart, that isn't true. If you leave, you leave, and everything else is okay. I'm okay. The world is okay. And am I sad that you left? Absolutely. But is it the end? It is not, because I have another place to go. If all of my world is about the other person, then I don't have anywhere else to go. And that's a broken heart.
I mean, it's just like it's a broken heart. I mean, it affects all the chakras, but it seems like it's just as much of a second chakra issue as it is a heart chakra issue.
It totally is, right? And so when we see it from a physical standpoint, we can connect it into all the chakras as an endocrine problem, right? So I mean, really, when they have physical heart problems, there is an endocrine issue that's going on there. There is a nervous system issue. There is a circulation issue. There is a digestive issue. They all go into that.
Oh my God, my family. As you said that, I kept getting like flashes of my family members in my head.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is where we look at it as, oh, it's heart disease. Like when we put it in this context, it's not being connected to source disease.
So the realm, you know how we've been talking about, okay, so the elementals is the first chakra, and the second chakra is earth, like the physical realm. And then the third chakra is the realm of the emotions. Did I miss something? I feel like one of them is the second chakra, angels.
Yeah.
What did I say it was? I don't remember.
Well, physical, which is also true.
Yeah. Okay. And then so fourth chakra, what realm are we talking about here?
So this would be kind of like we're talking about, and we started with ascended masters. So plural, and both masculine and feminine. So that's where a lot of people talk about Metatron. I think it's a really interesting one as an angelic entity. And I think if we look at it developmentally, all of these ascended masters have been angels, have been human, have been, right? They all have lived in these different realms. So they learn what's necessary to learn there, and they grow beyond it. And so when we're looking at ascended master, that would be the higher octave. So this would be the highest octave of development. So I've been all these other things. And so as we're going through them, and essentially like we're saying, from root. So we're saying this is the entity. So in this realm of the root chakra, hummingbird is actually the entity that runs all that elemental stuff. And so I know it sounds interesting, but this is the guidance that I get. And so this is the elemental hummingbird that is the governance of that. So I call it governance. Raphael, second chakra, Divine Mother, third, Christ. So light. That Christ would be Magdalene and Jesus.
So hummingbird is second chakra?
First. Yeah. And that kind of puts, like, all of the animal totems are usually in that root chakra. And so that's another way to understand that. But I mean, many systems, like, one of the thoughts that you brought forward and the questions that you sent me was about the 7 rays, right? So, I mean,
yeah, I was just going to ask her.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a whole nother body of work that I think each religion and esoteric tradition from the beginning of time has talked about rays and talked about 7. So that's basically homework for people that are listening. Look into this. So look into the people that talk about rays. What is the religion? What is the esoteric tradition? Theosophy is the one that I think of the most when you talk about race. So I think that's absolutely where, and it's just so thick, right? We could do years of podcasts on theosophy. Right?
Yeah. I love theosophy. Well, like the experience when Merlin came to me here at the front yard, and he said to me, like, I'm appearing to you in this purple and white robe with this purple and white hat and smoking a pipe, because that's that's how society has taught you I look and who I am. But he said,
Hmm.
he said in reality, I am many things and I have many names. And
Hmm.
he said, I am also Saint Germain and I am the Violet Flame. And
Absolutely.
I'd
Yeah.
never even heard of that.
Right.
And so I was like, whoa. So I came
Hmm.
in, or at some point, I looked up Saint Germain, and it talks about his different incarnations.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he had been Merlin, and he had also been the father of Yeshua.
Yeah.
So Merlin and
Hmm.
Joseph
Yeah.
and Saint Germain are the same being in different
Hmm.
dimensions and like
Yeah.
bubbles, like you say.
It totally, yeah. It's so helpful to understand that that this, like Melchizedek, in the physical, Jesus, right? Michael, Archangel Michael, Jesus, right? So I mean, we just put these things together, and that's what the brain always wants to do. It wants to create, something like this chart that we have here, right? So it wants to create that. Like, this is how I understand this thing that I live in, and that's what we're doing here. We're just making an attempt to say, let's simplify it into, here are some words, and then you do the work through your meditation, through investigating, right? I mean, we live in a world where lots of information is available. And so this is just another place where you can gain information and apply it and say, I'm applying this information and I feel better. I feel more connected. I feel that I have a soul. I feel that I have this bigness that is a spirit. That's what we want. We want it to actually show up in your physical life as, I have less wrath, less vicious anger and destructive anger, and I have more compassion. And that's how we want it to show up, so that when you understand the heart and you understand that it's this connector of all these other things, and it ends up with compassion, then we know compassion is very important.
Hmm. Right after I had that Merlin experience,
Hmm.
do you know who Stephen Noble is? He has a YouTube channel and he does lots of beautiful guided meditations with
Oh
archangels.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
All this.
hmm, yeah.
So he had some meditation, and I always like to read his description of the
Hmm.
meditation. And he was telling this, okay, so when I was out in the yard and Merlin came,
Hmm.
first he sat in it, he appeared like not as a solid fleshy being, but he appeared
Hmm.
as holographic.
Nice.
And I could hear him just like I can hear you talking to me.
Hmm.
And then he just kind of dropped his hologram and he came over and he put his hands on my shoulders.
Nice.
And I won't go into the whole story because he did a whole healing on me in the yard. He had me lie down on the ground and all that. I think I told you about it. But anyway, my
You did.
point
It's
is this.
beautiful. Yeah.
So I was listening, or I was reading Stephen Noble's description of this certain meditation. It must have been about Merlin, because he said when he was in Glastonbury,
Hmm.
Merlin came to him and
Hmm.
put his hands on his shoulders.
Ah, that's
And I
nice.
was like, that must be a thing that Merlin does. Like,
Hmm.
he puts his hands on your shoulder. I was like, there's no way
That's
that I
awesome.
just had this experience. And now I finally just, I didn't need any
Yeah.
validation because it was as real as plain as day to me.
Yeah,
But just the
definitely.
synchronous in going, oh, whoa, like, oh, it just lit me up.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I love that. I mean, this is definitely what we want people to experience,
Yeah.
is we want you to do the thing. So like, that's why the homework, right? Go out in nature, put your feet on the ground and have an intention and create a ceremony and have an experience like this. So this is where, the experience is what we're about. This is humanness experience. So it is, that's what we want. We don't just want words and knowledge. Or I have a lot in my work that I do where people will say, yeah, I know, or I know that, or I know that. Yeah, I know that. I know that. Right? And how does that sit? Is it integrated? No. There's definitely a gnosis of it. There's a knowledge of it for sure. But is it, when that knowledge lands into your emotional body, does it just go, nope, not doing that? Right. So, the homework of just go out, sit in nature, the homework of breathe in 6 and exhale 12 seems very simple, but it is a very spiritual act. And so this is what these simple things that we recommend during these podcasts, these sessions, the things that we learn, they don't seem connected somehow, but they absolutely are. And so just know that everything we're doing here is absolutely connected to growth, development, moving towards an experience of life that is less suffering and more joy, more happiness.
So this heart that connects all the other chakras, that is really, I mean, people like to say that the eighth chakra is the Earth Star chakra, or it's up here, or it's whatever. But
Yeah.
but I like your reframe that this really part is, and the math shows it. And math is, I mean, math is like
Exactly.
math has the final say, I think.
Absolutely.
But so, and it's the realm of ascended masters, and the essential oil is dill. Why is that? Why is the essential oil? I think it's great. I love dill, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what the connection is there.
I actually don't know. And it was fascinating when it came through. And it's, I think that we could put it in the context of color, right? So it does have a very green, kind of this life green. Like I say, what is the color of the chakra? This tree I have in the backyard, and it's getting ready to bloom out with these new leaves. And that color is just outstanding green. So it's that color green. And so this is where life. So what does it represent? Life. When we see that color green, it represents life. And so I do think that dill, from that standpoint of what is the quality of the plant itself and how does it relate to the actual heart. So I definitely know that is true. And so, it has, phytochemicals like all plants do, right? So I think that every time I dive into like, why did the spirit guides have me drinking tangerine juice right now? And then I actually look into it. They say it first. And then I'm like, oh, like most of the stuff I'm reading is about the nervous system. So here again, this idea of citrus, which I've had a problem with most of my life. And now that I'm getting this development out back into my nervous system, I can actually process it. So fascinating. And also, I pour this glass of tangerine juice and it has this amazing color.
I know.
Right?
Sometimes I make it fresh squeezed.
Right. So this is about color. So, and the oil doesn't necessarily represent the color, but we want you to visualize that. We want you to see it as the green that dill is. And then even do the research, like look into it, find like, why does that make sense? Because that's always what I'll do. They'll tell me, and then I'll look into it and it'll start making sense. And be like, oh, okay. I would have never come to that on my own, but the guidance starts and then I get the details.
Well, dill is also similar to fennel in that like it's very wispy and light. And that whole thing, in the Egyptian pantheon of gods, how your feather gets your
Yes,
heart
yeah.
gets weighed against
Totally.
a feather, and if
Absolutely.
it's heavier than a feather, it's like, you're not ready yet. You got to go back to school or
I love
whatever,
that.
So it makes me think of that, how light and wispy it is.
Nice.
So that's how we want our
Yeah.
heart to be,
Absolutely.
How
Well,
dill
this is,
connected.
and what is the heaviness? That's what we're talking about with acceptance and forgiveness, right? These stages are heavy. And so when we actually release a lot of that emotional and mental content, we're not as heavy. And the heart is not as heavy. And the heart basically is not having to process all of this lower energy, anger, upper energy belief system that it's not fair. It's not fair. And I'm angry because of that, right? That tension, it all lands here. And you just shake it off.
So good. So good. Thank you. It's 1:11.
All right, we did it.
Perfect time to end.
Excellent. I love that.
Oh, thank you. Okay, don't go anywhere, all right, Kevin?
Yeah. All right.
Okay, hang tight.
All right.
So everybody, thank you for being patient. I know it took a while for us to clear, restream and get on here, but I think you'll find it's been a rich discussion. It may appear at first glance that the beginning was not directly related to the heart because we weren't talking, using the words heart chakra and saying
Mhm.
this and that and
Yeah.
making all the connections. But as we went deeper into the conversation, Kevin shared with us actually that everything that we had been talking about in the first part before we actually deliberately talked about heart chakra is all related. And that's, I think, what Kevin was demonstrating, right? That it's
Mhm.
like it is all connected. The heart
Absolutely.
chakra
Yeah.
is the connector, and we are connected, body, soul, and spirit, and
Mhm.
things that we often maybe even think are not connected are connected. So it's all
Absolutely.
connected.
It's all connected.
And we thank you for being here. And whether you're watching this on the live or on the replay, we hope that if you found some value here, you will share it, because that is
Yeah.
really, really why we're doing this, and really why Spirit guides us to do these things in the first place, is so that we can share this knowledge that Spirit is granting us.
Mhm.
And thank you for being here. And I gotta say, ciao for now. Thank you,
All right.
Kevin. And
Yeah.
we'll talk to you soon, guys. We'll be back in a month talking about the throat chakra. Maybe even I won't wear a scarf for that one.
All right. Excellent.
Okay.
Perfect.
Ciao for now, everyone.